All right, we are back for another edition of Doc Talks, coming at you from the Elevate Sunset location. My dog Z here.
And my man, Dr. Booth, at Elevate Sports Performance and Healthcare, here to help you talk about.
This time we're talking about the art of jumping. So it's kind of a broad topic. It's used across so many different variations of movement. So one, we're going to talk about keys. We're going to talk about things that are going to be helpful to think about, things to hopefully help you from not doing, and then maybe like some concepts of why you should, maybe train the jump. It's pretty, like I said, it's pretty useful across all avenues of movement, or a lot of avenues of movement, and a lot of different sports.
Yeah, in just about every field sport, and even track and field, you're going to need to be able to produce a lot of force quickly, meaning you gotta be strong and fast and powerful. And jumping is a great way of expressing that, and training your jumping is a great way of expressing that. But jumping transcends athleticism, because who else would benefit from jumping?
So, and we actually had this conversation right off camera. Looking at the reactive nature of a jump, once you're in the air, you're going to have to respond to the ground that you're jumping on. So what does that mean for the body? It can start to absorb impact. It can make a quick decision and stabilize very quickly. So if you're practicing a jump, we're talking about fall reduction. We're talking about anybody that is scared of having an injury because of a false step, or going on a hike and they're worried about the unevenness of the path that they're on. That is why you train that stuff, so you can create stopping power that is going to be able to hold your weight and you don't fall.
Yeah, it really, especially in regards to falls, a lot of people think that it's a balance problem, and so you do these static balancing things, but the reason why you fall is because you misstep from something and you can't catch yourself from that misstep.
Yeah.
If you work on something like jumping, and this is something that we'll do with any age. I've had people well into their 70s, 80s, 90s work on at least catching themselves into a fall, which we'll show you later, small jumps. It's really important to be able to preserve that, and especially as we grow older, one of the things that we lose that puts us at risk for falls or injuries is power. That's probably one of the biggest factors for mortality, because if you fall and break your hip or something like that, your chances of living for a long period of time significantly decrease. Doing something like building your power with jumps can help mitigate and reduce your risk of falling into that pattern. No pun intended.
Falling in that pattern, got it. We gotta respect this, and I think it needs to be under the context of it's not just a basketball player that needs jumping, it's not just a football player that needs jumping. That's why we program that stuff in all programming at Elevate. We have variations, at least if the patient or the client is able to do it. We're going to try to train something that's going to be going to be this power-based movement. When we look at like a performance pyramid, we got to move well, we got to be strong, then we got to start thinking speed and acceleration. That's kind of like a more how would I say it? It's a harder skill to attain, but you can still work on that. Not to say if you don't work on all these things, you can't work on this. It's one of those types of movements that you want to really respect, because you are moving fast. There's a lot of decisions that need to be made by your body very quickly. So if you have the strength, if you can move well, it just makes that power potential higher. So that jump to be higher.
And a lot of times if you neglect that aspect, let's say you're someone who is an athlete and you just continue pushing the strength side, so you're lifting a ton of heavy weight, you're going slow, you're taking large rest periods. Well, if you've heard the expression speed kills, that's very true, in the sense that the faster you can do things, the more effective you're going to be at your craft, regardless of what that is. A lot of times what people will run into is when they go too far down the strength side, most strength efforts are done slowly. if you don't believe me, try doing your 1 rep bench. I benched yesterday, by the way. It was with my friend. It was glorious.
There you go.
Been like, actually, last time I benched was with him too, a few months ago. But
You're well sore.
not too bad.
Not yet.
Yeah, stay tuned. But if that's all you're doing and you're lifting very heavy, usually at those lower rep ranges or higher efforts, you are moving the weight very slow because it's heavy. And if you transition that to your sports and you slow down, you're going to get beat by the competition, because if they can move just a hair faster than you, even if you're stronger, that's not going to get you to where you need to be. So it's important that you get strong enough, but then you have to be able to exhibit or show that strength as quickly as possible. And that's what separates the greats from the good people.
Yeah, I mean, if you can squat, bench, whatever, 1,000 pounds, and it doesn't translate to sport, doesn't matter. So, yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. You have to make that translation into sport. And if you only want to squat and you only want to do that, that's fine too. But if your main objective is to be a better mover, be able to be more adaptable, you're going to want to start training the variety of movement and speed, and this is one of them, the jump. This is a big expression of power. So why is it important that we can accelerate and decelerate the body? So we get our body moving very quickly, and then we can get it to very quickly decelerate. Really, really important if we're talking about even a fall, or if we're trying to, leap for a basketball. Those are very similar needs. It's just that one has maybe a higher demand. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's also important to make sure your tendons stay strong. So the big thing when you're producing power quickly is your tendons contribute a lot to the spring effect that happens when you go to jump or sprint or anything like that. And a lot of times, especially nowadays, we're seeing a lot more tendon injuries, especially at higher levels. Now, some of this is because of some load management issues, but you can help improve your load tolerance and improve your efficiency at performing something like jump or something powerful by doing these types of tasks. One of the things that we incorporate a lot when we're working with someone who maybe has like Achilles tendonitis or patellar tendonitis is doing jump training, because that helps expose the tendons to the loads that a lot of times led to the inflammatory response that we see. So it's really important for tendon health as well, which is a lot of times who's going to be tearing patellar tendons and Achilles tendons, aside from high-level athletes, who'll also be your weekend warrior.
Yeah, 40-somethings that haven't been exercising a lot, and then they go out and they want to sprint.
Yep.
Happens a lot.
Oh, tons. So if you want to reduce your risk of having that happen, it would behoove you to practice jumping. And a lot of the progressions that we'll show you can be a way of exposing your tendons to that load, so they're at a reduced risk of popping when the time is.
Yeah, when the softball's going and you got to run, it happens.
Yep.
When we're gonna talk about this thing called the stretch shortening cycle. What we really want to understand is when we're dropping into, say, the bottom of a squat, and we have to come out of that relatively quickly. That's that cycle that like you said, the tendons have a little bit more load on them. There's a little bit of a spring to them. If those haven't adapted to that, and they get exposed to it really quick, we have a very high risk of making that stuff more sensitive. So going through that stuff slow and then progressing into the more of the stretch cycle at the very end of that squat is a proper progression that reduces some of the risk. So we need to have that progression correctly first. So when we talk about some of the movements, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're trying to see if we can do a slower, easier variation first to load the tendons, ligaments, and then as we get better, more threshold, more strength, and more capabilities and understanding of how to use those mechanics, then we progress on to higher level jumping. We talked about a little bit, another topic we were going to say talk about was the age. It doesn't matter what age you are, we can train jumping. There's variations of of jumping that can be anything from, literally going up onto your toes and then catching yourself kind of quickly. That could be something that if you are of a little bit higher age and you don't feel like you want to get up off the ground, you're still training that ability to adapt to momentum coming down to the earth again, and you're catching that body weight. That's huge for fall reduction. So reacting to your environment, understanding like load threshold for your tendons, and then being able to accelerate and decelerate your body. Those are really good things to think about on why it's important to train this jumping.
Absolutely. Now you might be wondering, well, docs, what are the keys to being an effective jumper?
You just got to be like Zach.
Sometimes, if you want to have the best 20-inch vertical out there, then tune into what we're going to talk about. Some of the biggest keys when it comes to effective jumping, one of the things that I think is most important is the ability to jump in the direction that you're trying to go. So, for example, if I had a bouncy ball and I wanted the bouncy ball to go as high in the air as possible, where would I throw the bouncy ball? No, I would I would throw it straight down, so then it would bounce as high as I could up in the ground and then go up very high.
Makes sense.
I'm not a good thrower, right? So me throwing it up that way is not going to go very high. But if I slam it on the ground really hard, it's more likely to go as higher in the air, as opposed to if I sling it up against the corner of the wall.
Try to get it to go up.
Yeah, it's still going to go up, but it won't go up anywhere near as high as if I throw it straight down. The same principle applies to when you are jumping. A lot of times when people jump, they'll bend over at the waist like they're doing a deadlift and then try to go as high as they can up in the air with minimal knee bend. Well, that's essentially throwing the bouncy ball into the corner of the wall, hoping that you go up really high. What you want to be able to do to go as high as you can in the air is to go straight up and down. And same thing is if you are someone who's wants to jump forward, like in a broad jump, or maybe you're trying to go catch a ball or something like that. You want to then hinge yourself backwards so then you go forwards, as opposed to really creating a lot of knee bend. This is one reason why when we coach kettlebell swings, we don't have people bend their knees a lot, because we want to throw the kettlebell as far forward as we can.
Pendulum.
So you want to apply that same principle when you're doing jumping. Direction is really important.
It's funny, I was just thinking of the time we set up what's called a Vertimax. It tests people's ability to jump and then touch these little pegs, or slats, I should say. And you could tell when people were warming up that they either have a little bit of an understanding on how to jump or zero understanding at all. People that weren't very versed in jumping, they were going all the way down to the ground into this really, really deep jump and then trying to accelerate out of it. So in addition to what you're saying, letting your hips go back behind you and really getting this kind of forward lean if you're going to want to jump forward. You want to have the force pushing you this way as opposed to going straight up and then trying to get across, right? These individuals that were doing this test, they were getting really far down to their squat and then coming out, and then the ones that did the best, they barely dropped their hips, got into a really solid kind of athletic stance, and then sprung out of it. Our body works the best, or I should say the most powerful, when we're in small dips as opposed to finding our end range and then exploding out of our end range. So when you think of like going to get seated into a chair, if I were to go all the way down here and then try to jump out of my chair, or if I did from here and then tried to jump, I would be much more faster the second variation, because my body's in kind of like a more close to neutral position. We're really strong when we're there. So if you want to maximum curl, would you start from here or would you start from here? You want to start from here because you have a lot more control, you have a lot more ability to produce force. If you start way out here, you're kind of limited. So again, that's the concept there with jumping, is you go small into a dip and then come out of that as quickly as possible during those really kind of neutral ranges of motion.
Now, the only caveat to your example, Dr. Booth, is because he's got some huge biceps, his curling skills are good no matter where he starts. But that goes back to the stretch shortening cycle as well. So the way the stretch shortening cycle works is you want to just give a quick little spring so you go faster, as opposed to like if I take my middle finger and I just actively try to go as hard as I can. It's nowhere near as fast as if I lift up and press down. Well, if I were to take this way out of range, I wouldn't be anywhere near as fast as that quick there. So the same principle applies to what Dr. Booth was saying. That quick dip helps elicit the stretch shortening cycle and is significantly faster than going all the way down. Because think about it from a time perspective. If we were playing basketball and someone shoots and they miss the shot and we're trying to get a rebound, if Dr. Booth takes a long time and he dips way down to try to jump up as high as he can, the ball is going to fall at a faster rate than you'll be able to recover from that. Versus if someone else dips straight down, they go right up, they'll be able to catch the ball and perform the play much faster. So that's another reason why you want to have just a quick dip in the direction you want to go. It's because it's faster, it's more efficient, and it takes advantage of that quick stretch that you need to be successful.
Yeah, and that's not just going straight up. It's going forward. It's going side. It's
sprinting.
All of those matter with creating power. You want to be in your most efficient ranges of motion, not your end ranges of motion. Getting out of the blocks. You have to be into some pretty significant ranges of motion. If you're, this is like for a track person. You're into these really kind of deep movements. That's why it's so important to get out of that as quickly as possible, so you can start accelerating at a more rapid pace. You try to get out of that stuff as quickly as possible, slam out of that, and then you're moving a little bit quicker. So another point to think about for the keys for effective jumping is landing. We have to cater our landing, how we're training our landing of our jump, to our goal. Is it to be able to repeat the jump? Then we want to have a nice kind of soft landing, then spring back out. Soft landing, spring back out. If we want to be able to change direction immediately, we want to be able to stop our movement as quickly as possible. So there's a couple of different concepts on landing. It's not all the same. You don't just land. If you want to set a goal of being able to land and catch yourself, you want to be able to stop yourself as fast as possible. So that's when we start training our different kind of landing mechanics, and our apparatuses might change. We might start changing into some other things that we're going to go over in a bit that look like the end of a jump as opposed to just creating the jump. So landings make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And to piggyback on that, when you're doing landing or when you're jumping, you also want to make sure your body position is on point. So a lot of times if let's say we're doing vertical jumps, you want to make sure hips, knees, ankles are all relatively in a straight line. A lot of times what we'll commonly see is the knee may actually cave in as you jump, which could potentially put you at risk for knee injuries, among other things, especially when you're doing something fast and things of that nature. Or a lot of times that kind of goes back to the hips not going in the direction you want. Or even if we talk about, like you were talking about with change of direction, if you want to do that quick stop and then you want to go the opposite way, well, you got to make sure that your leg gets in the position you want to push in the opposite direction. So the example I'm thinking is a cut. So a lot of times when people cut, they don't press their foot down enough to be able to push into the opposite direction. And so then what happens is they might instead take a step, which puts that ankle that's planted at risk for injury. So you want to make sure that you're putting your body where it needs to go, trying to keep things in straight lines and achieving the angles you need to that allow you to produce maximal force with minimal risk of injury.
Yeah, and it's all got to be practice, right? If you go onto the football field for the first time and you're trying to make that cut, and you have a flat foot that's not digging in on one surface, you're going to learn really quickly that it's a little bit easier for you to cut if you dig one side in and then push. Or you'll fall down and get ran over. But
yes.
Another thing is arm swing or arm path. Some people can get that backwards. You want to have momentum start moving towards your jump. not the opposite way. So you're not jumping and doing something, where your arms are not taking you towards your destination first, and then they can follow through. But arm path is got to be practiced just as much. One thing that comes to mind is creating power, creating speed on a slide board. We have slide boards at our facility, so it's a very slick surface. You put some cloth kind of booties on your shoes, and you slide back and forth. If your arms are just kind of doing this side to side, you're not going to be very fast. But if your arms are whipping towards the side, then it's going to carry your momentum towards the slide board and then carry it back. So again, your arms can create this acceleration and get you going in the right direction just as much as your legs can. If you're jumping with no arms, you're missing out on probably more than probably around 50% of your jump. I don't know the exact metrics on that, but a very big majority of your jump.
Yeah, and the arm swing allows you to get into your hips and your knee positions a lot better because it's just another thing that's throwing you into momentum to be able to produce force in the direction that you so desire.
Cool. Maybe one of the first progressions that we would have for jumping. So if we're looking at someone and they have zero skill in jumping, we need to start understanding how to maybe start creating what looks like the landing mechanics, and then also trying to get your body to move fast. So typical things that we like to start with is called a reverse jump. So if we're reaching up over our head and we're getting all the way up onto our toes, and then we're coming down very, very quickly here, and we're stopping ourselves quickly, that's going to be very, very good for starting to understand the mechanics on how to stop yourself. So a reverse jump, very, very helpful. We can do reverse jumps onto both feet. We can do reverse jumps onto single foot, reverse jump onto single foot. There's a bunch of variations for that, but reverse jump, one of the first things that we can add into a jumping progression.
Now, if you wanted to progress that, switch out. You can then go to a box jump. Now, a lot of people, they might be seeing these, people do all these wild and crazy box jumps on YouTube or whatever, like the 54-inch box jump.
That's what you got, right?
Yeah, that's what I do for my warm-up normally. But the reason why we're using the box is actually one of the earlier phases because it limits how far you have to land. So I'll give you an example. Let's say one of us goes on top of the building here at Elevate, and we do the landing that Dr. Booth was talking about. Well, because that's really high up, gravity is pushing you down at a significantly faster rate, so your body has to accommodate a lot more stress to be able to stick the landing. Kids don't try that at home. What a box does is it limits how far we jump. So if we still go up on the roof, but I have another platform that I'm jumping down to, I spend less time battling gravity, therefore it's less stressful to my joints. So all you would do is the exact same jump and landing that Dr. Booth was talking about, but up to a box. The big keys that I look for when I'm coaching a box jump. The first would be a soft landing. So you wonderful people on the internet should not hear me land. And the reason why that is because we're working on landing mechanics. We want to make sure we're minimizing stress to the joints. The other thing would be a slight knee bend. So a lot of times when people do a box jump, they'll land with the leg straight. If I want to think about it from a force production standpoint, if I were to do another jump, well, then I don't get to take advantage of that stress shortening cycle. I'm going to get beat by my person. So you want to make sure that as you jump up, you get a slight bend in the knees. The last thing that I look for is, because we're only doing a single jump, you want whole foot contact. Meaning when I jump up, I don't want to land on my toes because that could be a bit stressful on the knees. I also don't want to land high on my heels because then I'm going to fall backwards. So we want whole foot contact over the box, just like so. And you'll also notice that I used my arm action to elicit the jump. Now a little trick. If you're someone whose jump is throwing the hips way back to get up and you want to try to get a little bit more vertical, an easy way to fix that is to elevate your heels with something. So I'll use this wonderful block that this old man patient I had at one point made it to me. if you elevate your heels, it allows you to go a little bit more straight up and down. If you got like a couple plates, if you're at a gym, or a couple books at home, works great. So from here, if I jump from that position, it's significantly easier to be straight up and down as I'm performing the box jump.
Good. Yeah. So then maybe another variation. So once we've been able to land up on a box, catch our body weight, now we need to jump up into the air and catch our body weight with gravity going all the way back down to the earth. So we'll look at going over little easy implements. These are little hurdles. So if we want to start with a hurdle and a stick, because again, we're practicing the landing mechanics. So small dip into the hips, exploding up, and then catching. So small dip, up and catch. Try to land soft, and then respond with another jump after you're ready. The next variation, so if we were to do a couple of those, it would be here, stick, land, get going, stick, land. And then if we wanted to do repeated jumps, that would be the next hardest thing, since we have to kind of stop ourselves quickly and then get going again. We're going to be here to a repeated jump, and then we would keep going. So variations of using hurdles to start training, and then knowing the progression on how to implement that into your training program. Pretty useful with hurdles. And then the next one, what do we got next?
The next one is loaded jumps.
Loaded jumps.
So if you want to produce a little bit more power, once you've got, because really these have helped introduce the landing mechanics. Now let's say you want to get more powerful than you can possibly imagine. That's where loaded jumps come into play. The mechanics stay the same. The only thing that you're going to add to it now is weight. So like here, I'm going to have a kettlebell. A lot of times I'll do repeat jumps with the kettlebell just right in the middle of my body, going straight up and down as high as I can, like so. When you're doing weighted jumps, the big key is you want to make sure the weight is not too heavy, because if it gets too heavy, you're going to be slower. Just like we talked about with the heavy squat, right? If you're moving that weight really, really slow, you're going to get stronger, but you're not going to be more powerful. So you want to just add enough weight that it allows you to stay fast, but it provides a little bit more challenge than our other jumps.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
And so maybe just another concept to think about for jumping. There's movements that we can use in our upper body, or it looks like the weight's going to be moving by our upper body, but it started with our lower body. So if we look at what's called a push press or a push jerk, we're going to get into a small dip again, still loaded, and then we're going to come up to this end range position. That's still creating this upward movement, and my hands going up towards the area that I'm jumping towards. So again, we're kind of working on mechanics of jumping there too. Push jerks, push press, those things are very helpful for initiating the small movement of the dip with the hips, and then creating really, really fast movement, getting things to move quickly, so that can translate into a jump. Lastly, what we want to look at is, and there's a couple of different ways that we can train this, or that we can think of the training of this. It's called the depth jump. So if we're starting at the very end of the jump, so if we're, or I guess I shouldn't say the end, but the very top of the jump. So we have jumped up. Gravity is now telling us we're going back down. That's where we're kind of starting at, right when the gravity starts to tell us, hey, we're going back down. So we're here. We're still thinking of the same mechanics that Dr. Couples was saying, soft landing, or we can start thinking about how to rapidly stop ourselves once we hit the ground. So soft landing variation, we're here, step off and catch. We can go here, step off, catch, one leg, both legs. Again, those are variations, and again, this is a progression. You're not going to start with this. It's very advanced. You have to know that you're not going to collapse your knees. You're not going to have anything wonky in your mechanics. This is going to be a further along the progression. And then if we want to start training that ability to stop ourselves very quickly, we're going to step and stop as fast as we possibly can. So now we can change direction as fast as we've as fast as we possibly can. So those are some of the variations that we've came up with for our progressions and regressions, and that's just of a vertical jump. There's plenty of other ones for jumping to the side, jumping forward, but typically when people think of jumping, the first thing they would probably think of is jumping straight up. But again, jumping to the side, jumping forward, those are all different variations and different progressions.
And if you're someone who doesn't go vertical and you got to go in some other directions, if you want to learn more from us, you just give us a call at 702-558-2151, because we work with a lot of performers of all ages, shapes, and sizes who need power and who need to move in multiple directions. If you're a human being, chances are that's you. If you give us a call at that number, 702-558-2151, you can sign up for a discovery session with us, and we can kind of talk about how we can best implement this type of stuff into your training.
Again, if you are tuning in kind of late, or you got into the Instagram feed and you didn't get to see all of it, it will be up on our website soon, so keep checking back on there to see when you can see the entire production of this. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.
Take care.